Good afternoon, Internet. Boy, I hope you're having a great day. We're having a little bit of fun here in Texas, and I'm going to take you along and go out the front door here and show you all the fun that we're having today. Look at this. And we have thunder and lightning and ice. So, yeah, welcome to North Texas. End of January, first part of February. It's not that unusual. It just doesn't last as long as it does. Careful, that's a little slippery. It just doesn't last as long as it does up in the North Country is all. So, there you go. Alrighty. Let's set you back down here. In case somebody walks by, we'll get you adjusted so we don't have any worries about that. You'll plug in the sun. There, I guess. And what a better day to read a story. Haven't started a fire in the fireplace though, because kind of saving that. We're running low, and kind of saving that in case we run out of power. We can still have heat. I haven't put the generator together. We bought a generator, but I haven't put it together yet either, so we can plug stuff into the house and keep all that running. But we'll get it. We'll get it. All right, here comes the sun. Doot-and-doo-doo. Here comes the sun. I say it's all right. Do-do-do-do-do-do. Alrighty, that's chapter 13. The Den of the Dragon Nets. You see? Okay. Our friends had a good start and were able to maintain it, for with their 8 wings they could go just as fast as could the gargoyles. All the way to the great rock the wooden people followed them, and when Jim finally alighted at the mouth of the cavern, the pursuers were still some distance away. "But I'm afraid they'll catch us yet," said Dorothy, greatly excited. "No, we must stop them," declared the wizard. "Quick, Zeb, help me pull off these wooden wings." Excuse me, a little bit of lunch in my mouth there still, apparently. They tore off the wings, for which they had no further use, and the wizard piled them in a heap just outside the entrance to the cavern. Then he poured over them all of the kerosene oil that was left in his oil can, and lighting a match set fire to the pile. The flames leaped up at once, and the bonfire began to smoke and roar and crackle just as the great army of wooden gargoyles arrived. The creatures drew back at once, being filled with fear and horror, for such a dreadful thing as a fire they had never before known in all the history of their wooden land. Inside the archway were several doors, leading to different rooms built into the mountain, and Zeb and the wizard lifted these wooden doors from their hinges and tossed them all on the flames. "That will prove a barrier for some time to come," said the little man, smiling pleasantly all over his wrinkled face at the success of their stratagem. "Perhaps the flames will set fire to all that miserable wooden country, and if it does, the loss will be very small, and the gargoyles never will be missed. But come, my children, Let us explore the mountain and discover which way we must go in order to escape from this cavern, which is getting to be almost as hot as a bake oven." To their disappointment, there was within this mountain no regular flight of steps by means of which they could mount to the earth's surface. A sort of inclined tunnel led upward for a way, and they found the floor for it both rough and steep. Then a sudden turn brought them to a narrow gallery where a buggy could not pass. This delayed and bothered them for a while because they did not wish to leave the buggy behind them. It carried their baggage and was useful to ride in whenever there were good roads, and since it had accompanied them so far in their travels, they felt it their duty to preserve it. So Zeb and the Wizard set to work and took off the wheels and the top, and then they put the buggy edgewise so it would take up the smallest space. In this position they managed, with the aid of the patient cab horse, to drag the vehicle through the narrow part of the passage. It was not a great distance, fortunately, and when the path grew broader, they put the buggy together again and proceeded more comfortably. But the road was nothing more than a series of rifts or cracks in the mountain, and it went zigzag in every direction, slanting first up and then down until they were puzzled as to whether they were any nearer to the top of the earth than when they had started, hours before. "Anyhow," said Dorothy, "we've escaped those awful gurgles, and that's one comfort." "Probably the gargoyles are still busy trying to put out the fire," returned the Wizard. "But even if they succeeded in doing that, it would be very difficult for them to fly amongst these rocks, so I'm sure we need fear them no longer." Once in a while they would come to a deep crack in the floor, which made the way quite dangerous, but there was still enough oil in the lanterns to give them light, and the cracks were not so wide that they were not so wide but that they were able to jump over them. Sometimes they had to climb over heaps of loose rock, where Jim could scarcely drag the buggy. At such times Dorothy, Zeb, and the Wizard all pushed behind and lifted the wheels over the rough places, so they managed, by dint of hard work, to keep going. But the little party was both weary and discouraged when at last, on turning a sharp corner, the wanderers found themselves in a vast cave, arching high over their heads and having a smooth, level floor. The cave was circular in shape, and all around its edges, near to the ground, appeared groups of dull yellow lights, two of them being always side by side. These were motionless at first, but soon began to flicker more brightly and to sway slowly from side to side, and then up and down. "What sort of place is this?" asked the boy, trying to see more clearly through the gloom. "I cannot imagine, I'm sure," answered the Wizard, also peering about. "Whoa!" snarled Eureka, arching her back until her hair stood straight on end. "It's a den of alligators, or crocodiles, or some other dreadful creatures. Don't you see their terrible eyes?" "Eureka sees better in the dark than we can," whispered Dorothy. "Tell us, dear, what did the creatures look like?" she asked, addressing her pet. "I simply can't describe 'em," answered the kitten, shuddering. "Their eyes are like pie plates and their mouths like coal scuttles, but their bodies don't seem very big." "Where are they?" inquired the girl. "They are in little pockets all around the edge of this cavern." "Oh, Dorothy, you can't imagine what horrid things they are. They're uglier than the gargoyles." "Tut, tut, be careful how you criticize your neighbors," spoke a rasping voice nearby. "As a matter of fact, you are rather ugly-looking creatures yourselves, and I'm sure Mother has often told us we were the loveliest and prettiest things in all the world." Hearing these words, our friends turned in the direction of the sound, and the wizard held his lantern so that their light would flood one of the little pockets in the rock. "Why, it's a dragon!" he exclaimed. "No," answered the owner of the big yellow eyes which were blinking at them so steadily. "You are wrong about that. We hope to grow to be dragons someday, but just now we're only dragonettes." "What's that?" asked Dorothy, gazing fearfully at the great scaly head, the yawning mouth, and the big eyes. "Young dragons, of course, but we are not allowed to call ourselves real dragons until we get our full length," was the reply. "And big dragons are very proud and don't think children amount to much. But Mother says that someday we will all be very powerful and important." "Where is your mother?" asked the wizard, anxiously looking around. "She has gone up to the top of the earth to hunt for our dinner. If she has good luck, she will bring us an elephant or a brace of rhinoceri, or perhaps a few dozen people to stay our hunger." "Oh, are you hungry?" inquired Dorothy, drawing back. "Very," said the dragonette, snapping its jaws. And do you eat people?" "To be sure, when we can get them. But they've been very scarce for a few years, and we usually have to be content with elephants or buffaloes," answered the creature in a regretful tone. "How old are you?" inquired Zeb, who stared at the yellow eyes as if fascinated. "Quite young, I grieve to say, and all of my brothers and sisters that you see here are practically my own age. If I remember rightly, we were 66 years old the day before yesterday." "But that isn't young," cried Dorothy in amazement. "No?" drawled the dragonette. "It seems to me very babyish." "Well, how old is your mother?" asked the girl. "Mother's about 2,000 years old, but she carelessly lost track of her age a few centuries ago and skipped several hundreds. She's a little fussy, you know, and afraid of growing old, being a widow and still in her prime." "I should think she would be," agreed Dorothy. Then, after a moment's thought, she asked, "Are we friends or enemies? I mean, will you be good to us, or do you intend to eat us?" "As for that, we dragonettes would love to eat you, my child, but unfortunately Mother has tied all our tails around the rocks at the back of our individual caves, so that we cannot crawl out to get you. If you choose to come nearer, we will make a mouthful of you in a wink. But unless you do, you will remain quite safe." There was a regretful accent in the creature's voice, and at the words all the other dragonettes sighed dismally. Dorothy felt relieved. Presently she asked, "Why did your mother tie your tails?" "Oh, she has sometimes gone for several weeks on her hunting trips. And if we were not tied, we would crawl all over the mountain and fight with each other and get into a lot of mischief. Mother usually knows what she is about, but she made a mistake this time, for you are sure to escape us unless you come too near, and you probably won't do that." "No, indeed," said the little girl. "We don't wish to be eaten by such awful beasts." "Permit me to say," returned the dragonette, "that you are rather impolite to call us names, knowing that we cannot resent your insults. We consider ourselves very beautiful in appearance, for Mother has told us so, and she knows. And we are of an excellent family, and have a pedigree that I challenge any humans to equal, as it extends back about 20,000 years, to the time of the famous green dragon of Atlantis, who lived in a time when humans had not yet been created. Can you match that pedigree, little girl?" "Well," said Dorothy, "I was born on a farm in Kansas, And I guess that's being just as spectable and haughty as living in a cave with your tail tied to a rock. If it isn't, I'll have to stand it, that's all." "Tastes differ," murmured the dragonette, slowly drooping its scaly eyelids over its yellow eyes, until they looked like half-moons. Being reassured by the fact that the creatures could not crawl out of their rock pockets, the children and the wizard now took time to examine them more closely. The heads of the dragonettes were as big as barrels and covered with hard, greenish scales that glittered brightly under the light of the lanterns. Their front legs, which grew just back of their heads, were also strong and big, but their bodies were smaller around than their heads, and dwindled away in a long line until their tails were slim as a shoestring. Dorothy thought if it had taken them 66 years to grow to this size, that it would be fully 100 years more before they could hope to call themselves dragons, and that seemed like a good while to wait to grow up. "It occurs to me," said the wizard, "that we ought to get out of this place before the mother dragon comes back." "Don't hurry," called one of the dragonettes. "Mother will be glad to meet you, I'm sure." "You may be right," replied the wizard, "but we're a little particular about associating with strangers. Will you kindly tell us which way your mother went to get on to the top of the earth?" "That is not a fair question to ask us," declared another dragonette. "For if we told you truly, you might escape us altogether. And if we told you an untruth, we would be naughty and deserve to be punished." "Then," decided Dorothy, "we must find our way out best we can." They circled all around the cavern, keeping a good distance away from the blinking yellow eyes of the dragonettes, and presently discovered that there were two paths leading from the wall opposite to the place where they had entered. They selected one of these at a venture and hurried along it as fast as they could go, for they had no idea when the mother dragon would be back, and were very anxious not to make her acquaintance. Ah. Oh, I skipped over that picture pretty quick. You guys like pictures? I like looking at pictures. Ozma uses the magic belt. Oh. For a considerable distance, the way led straight upward in a gentle incline, and the wanderers made such good progress that they grew hopeful and eager, thinking they might see sunshine at any minute. But at length they came unexpectedly upon a huge rock that shut off the passage and blocked them from proceeding a single step farther. The rock was separate from the rest of the mountain and was in motion, turning slowly around and around as if on a pivot. When first they came to it, there was a solid wall before them, but presently it revolved until there was exposed a wide, smooth path across it to the other side. This appeared so unexpectedly that they were unprepared to take advantage of it at first, and allowed the rocky wall to swing around again before they had decided to pass over. But they knew now that there was a means of escape, and so waited patiently until the path appeared for the second time. The children and the wizard rushed across the moving rock and sprang into the passage beyond, landing safely through, though a little out of breath. Jim the cab horse came last, and the rocky wall almost caught him, for just as he leaped to the floor of the further passage, the wall swung across it, and a loose stone that the buggy wheels knocked off against fell into the narrow crack where the rock turned, and became wedged there. They heard a crunching, grinding sound and a loud snap, and the turntable came to a stop, with its broadest surface shutting off the path from which they had come. "Never mind," said Zeb. "We don't want to go back anyhow." I'm not so sure of that, returned Dorothy. The mother dragon may come down and catch us here. It is possible, agreed the wizard, if this proves to be the path she usually takes. But I have been examining this tunnel, and I do not see any signs of so large a beast having passed through it. Then we're all right, said the girl, for if the dragon went the other way, she can't possibly get to us now. Of course not, my dear, but there is another thing to consider. The mother dragon probably knows the road to the earth's surface, and if she went the other way, then we have come the wrong way, said the wizard thoughtfully. Dear me, cried Dorothy, that would be unlucky, wouldn't it? Very. Unless this passage also leads to the top of the earth, said Zeb. For my part, if we manage to get out of here, I'll be glad it isn't the way the dragon goes. So will I, returned Dorothy. It's enough to have your pedigree flung in your face by those saucy dragonettes. No one knows what the mother might do. They now moved on again, creeping slowly up another steep incline. The lanterns were beginning to grow dim, and the wizard poured the remaining oil from one into the other, so that the one light would last longer. But their journey was almost over, for in a short time they reached a small cave from which there was no further outlet. They did not realize their ill fortune at first, for their hearts were gladdened by the sight of a ray of sunshine coming through a small crack in the roof of the cave, far overhead. That meant that their world, the real world, was not very far away, and that the succession of perilous adventures that had encountered had at last brought them near the earth's surface, which meant home to them. But when the adventurers looked more carefully around them, they discovered that they were in a strong prison from which there was no hope of escape. But we're almost on Earth again, cried Dorothy, for there is the sun, the most beautiful sun that shines. And she pointed eagerly at the crack in the distant roof. Almost on Earth isn't being there, said the kitten in a discontented tone. It wouldn't be possible for even me to get up to that crack, or through it if I got there. It appears that the path ends here, announced the wizard gloomily. And there is no way to go back, added Zeb with a low whistle of perplexity. I was sure it would come to this, in the end, remarked the old cab horse. Folks don't fall into the middle of the earth and then get back again to tell of their adventures. Not in real life. And the whole thing has been unnatural, because that cat and I are both able to talk your language and to understand the words you say. And so can the 9 tiny piglets, added Eureka. Don't forget them, for I may have to eat them after all. I've heard animals talk before, said Dorothy, and no harm came of it. Were you ever before shut up in a cave far under the earth with no way of getting out? Inquired the horse seriously. No, answered Dorothy, but don't you lose heart, Jim, for I'm sure this isn't the end of our story by any means. Right? Because look how much left of the book. She's right. The reference to the piglets reminded the wizard that his pets had not enjoyed much exercise lately and must be tired of the prison in his pocket. So he sat down upon the floor of the cave, brought the piglets out one by one, and allowed them to run around as much as they pleased. My dears, he said to them, I'm afraid I've got you into a lot of trouble, and that you will never again be able to leave this gloomy cave. What's wrong? Asked a piglet. We've been in the dark quite a while, and you may as well explain what has happened. The wizard told them of the misfortune that had overtaken the wanderers. Well, said another piglet, you are a wizard, are you not? I am, replied the little man. Then you can do a few whizzies and get us out of this hole, declared the tiny one. with much confidence. "I could if I happened to be a real wizard," returned the master sadly. "But I'm not, my piggy wheeze. I'm a humbug wizard." "Nonsense!" cried several of the piglets together. "You can ask Dorothy," said the little man in an injured tone. "It's true enough," returned the girl earnestly. "Our friend Oz is merely a humbug wizard, for he once proved it to me. He can do several very wonderful things, but if he knows how. But he can't whiz a single thing if he hasn't the tools and machinery to work with." "Thank you, my dear, for doing me justice," responded the wizard gratefully. "To be accused of being a real wizard, when I'm not, is a slander I will not tamely submit to. But I am one of the greatest humbug wizards that ever lived, and you will realize this when we have all starved together and our bones are scattered over the floor of this lonely cave." "I don't believe we'll realize anything when it comes to that," remarked Dorothy, who had been deep in thought. "But I'm not going to scatter my bones just yet, because I need them, and you probably need yours too." "We are hopeless to escape," sighed the wizard. "We may be helpless," answered Dorothy, smiling at him, "but there are others who can do more than we can. Cheer up, friends. I'm sure Ozma will help us." "Ozma!" exclaimed the wizard. "Who is Ozma?" "The girl that rules the marvelous land of Oz," was the reply. "She's a friend of mine, for I met her in the land of Ev not long ago, and went to Oz with her." "For the second time?" asked the wizard with great interest. "Yes. The first time I went to Oz, I found you there, ruling the Emerald City. After you went up in a balloon and escaped us, I got back to Kansas by means of a pair of magical silver shoes." "I remember those shoes," said the little man, nodding. "They once belonged to the Wicked Witch. Have you them here with you?" "No, I lost them somewhere in the air," explained the child. "But the second time I went to the land of Oz, I owned the Gnome King's magic belt, which is much more powerful than the silver shoes." "Where is that magic belt?" inquired the wizard, who had listened with great interest. "Ozma has it, for its powers won't work in a common, ordinary country like the United States. Anyone in a fairy country like the land of Oz can do anything with it. So I left it with my friend, the Princess Ozma, who used it to wish me in Australia with Uncle Henry." "And were you?" asked Zeb, astonished at what he heard. "Of course, in just a jiffy. And Ozma has an enchanted picture hanging in a room that shows her the exact scene where any of her friends may be at any time she chooses. All she has to do is to say, 'I wonder what so-and-so is doing,' and at once the picture shows where her friend is and what the friend is doing. That's real magic, Mr. Wizard, isn't it? Well, every day at 4 o'clock, Ozma has promised to look at me in that picture, and if I am in need of help, I am to make her a certain sign, and she will put on the Gnome King's magic belt and wish me to be with her in Oz." "Do you mean that Princess Ozma will see this cave in her enchanted picture and see all of us here and what we are doing?" demanded Zeb. "Of course. When it is 4 o'clock, she replied, with a laugh at his startled expression. "And when you make a sign, she will bring you to her in the land of Oz?" continued the boy. "That's it, exactly, by means of the magic belt." "Then," said the wizard, "you will be saved, little Dorothy, and I am very glad of it. The rest of us will die much more cheerfully when we know you have escaped our sad fate." I won't die, cheerfully protested the kitten. There is nothing cheerful about dying that I could ever see, although they say a cat has 9 lives, so must die 9 times. Have you ever died yet? Inquired the boy. No, and I'm not anxious to begin, said Eureka. Don't worry, dear, Dorothy exclaimed. I'll hold you in my arms and take you with me. Take us too, cried the 9 tiny piglets, all in one breath. Perhaps I can, answered Dorothy. I'll try. Couldn't you manage to hold me in your arms? Asked the cab horse. Dorothy laughed. I'll do better than that, she promised, for I can easily save you all once I am myself in the land of Oz. How? They asked. By using the magic belt. All I need to do is wish you with me, and there you'll be, safe in the royal palace. Good, cried Zeb. I built that palace, and the Emerald City too, remarked the wizard in a thoughtful tone, and I'd like to see them again, for I was very happy among the Munchkins and Winkies and Quadlings and Gillikins. Who are they? Asked the boy. The 4 nations that inhabit the land of Oz, was the reply. I wonder if they would treat me nicely if I went there again. Of course they would, declared Dorothy. They are still proud of their former wizard, and often speak of you kindly. Do you happen to know whatever became of the Tin Man and the Scarecrow? He inquired. They live in Oz yet, said the girl, and are very important people. And the Cowardly Lion? Oh, he lives there too, with his friend the Hungry Tiger. And Billina is there, because she liked the place better than Kansas and wouldn't go with me to Australia. I'm afraid I don't know the Hungry Tiger and Billina, said the wizard, shaking his head. Is Billina a girl? No, she's a yellow hen and a great friend of mine. You're sure to like Billina when you know her, asserted Dorothy. Your friends sound like a menagerie, remarked Zeb uneasily. Couldn't you wish me in some place safer than Oz? Don't worry, replied the girl. You'll just love the folks in Oz when you get acquainted. What time is it, Mr. Wizard? The little man looked at his watch, a big silver one that he carried in his vest pocket. 3:30, he said. Then we must wait for half an hour, she continued, but it won't take long after that to carry us all to the Emerald City. They sat silently thinking for a time. Then Jim suddenly asked, Are there any horses in Oz? Only one, replied Dorothy, and he's a sawhorse. A what? A sawhorse. Princess Ozma once brought him to life with a witch powder when she was a boy. Was Ozma once a boy? Asked Zeb wonderingly. Yes, a wicked witch enchanted her so she could not rule her kingdom, but she's a girl now, and the sweetest, loveliest girl in all the world. A sawhorse is the thing they saw boards on, remarked Jim with a sniff. It is when it's not alive, acknowledged the girl. But this sawhorse can trot as fast as you can, Jim, and he's very wise, too. Pah! I'll race the miserable wooden donkey any day in a week, cried the cab horse. Dorothy did not reply to that. She felt that Jim would know more about the sawhorse later on. The time dragged wearily enough to the eager watchers, but finally the wizard announced that 4 o'clock had arrived, and Dorothy caught up the kitten and began to make the signal that had been agreed upon at the faraway, invisible Ozma. Nothing seems to happen, said Zeb doubtfully. Oh, we must give Ozma time to put on the magic belt, replied the girl. She had scarcely spoken the words when she suddenly disappeared from the cave, and with her went the kitten. There had been no sound of any kind and no warning. One moment Dorothy sat beside them with the kitten in her lap, and a moment later the horse, the piglets, the wizard, and the boy were all that remained in the underground prison. "I believe we will soon follow her," announced the wizard, and in a tone of great relief, "for I know something about the magic of the fairyland that is called the Land of Oz. Let us be ready, for we may be sent for any minute." Dorothy made the signal. Poof! There she goes. He put the piglet safely away in his pocket again, and then he and Zeb got onto the buggy and sat expectantly upon the seat. "Will it hurt?" asked the boy, in a voice that trembled a little. "Not at all," replied the wizard. "It will all happen as quick as a wink." And that was the way it did happen. The cab horse gave a nervous start, and Zeb began to rub his eyes to make sure he was not asleep. For they were in the streets of a beautiful emerald green city, bathed in grateful green light that was especially pleasing to their eyes, and surrounded by merry-faced people in gorgeous green and gold costumes of many extraordinary designs. Before them were the jewel-studded gates of a magnificent palace, and now the gates opened slowly as if inviting them to enter the courtyard, where splendid flowers were blooming and pretty fountains shot their silvery sprays into the air. Zeb shook the reins to rouse the cab horse from his stupor of amazement, for the people were beginning to gather around and stare at the strangers. "Get up!" cried the boy, and at the word Jim slowly trotted into the courtyard and drew the buggy along the jeweled driveway to the great entrance of the royal palace. Oh, there they are. Yay! And next, old friends are reunited. Oh, that will be exciting. They're all back in the Land of Oz, all together again. Oh, that will be an exciting reunion, huh? Oh, there, that's better. Oh, good, the battery's about to die. So, be safe, stay warm. We will. And I wish you sweet dreams.